Have you ever been called off guard by an unexpected voice? I was myself when I woke up this morning. So forgive me, and if you have trouble hearing me, just wave your hand and I have someone ready to spring in and finish for me. So, I saw someone on the street last week who dropped a glove and someone came out and shouted at them and they turned around surprised. And last week we were sitting in a restaurant and there was a woman nearby who had a very shrill voice, and it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. So I've been really sensitive to voice this week, and I think it's ironic then that mine sounds this way this morning. But I began to wonder, what does the voice of God sound like? Have you ever thought about that? In the 1956 film, The Ten Commandments, God's voice in the burning bush is that of Charlton Heston, an old white man. In the 1999 film Dogma, God's voice was that of a young female pop singer, Alanis Morissette. In 2003, an older black man, Morgan Freeman, spoke for God in the film Bruce Almighty. It's no wonder we have trouble hearing or recognizing the voice of God. How do we even know what we're listening for? In our scripture today, about the story of Jesus' Transfiguration, which is a big churchy word that just means transformation or change, 3 of these disciples are also caught off guard by an unexpected voice. Jesus takes his closest friends up on the high mountaintop to get some peace and quiet, and to reveal to them his true identity, because even though they'd been traveling with him, some of them hadn't quite fully figured it out yet. 3 of the 4 Gospels in the Bible tell about this story. It's quite mysterious and somewhat outrageous. It sounds like something from a Hollywood script, with the special effects team transforming a regular man in dusty climbing gear into a gleaming, glowing human 1,000-watt light bulb, dressed in bright, sparkling, dust-free white, despite a long day of hiking and traveling. But Jesus was not starring in a movie, nor was he trying to impress his friends. He simply wanted to let them in on a little secret that might give them some comfort, some strength, and some courage for the events which were about to happen, specifically for his capture, his imprisonment, his torture, his murder, and his resurrection from the dead. This mountaintop experience was a special gift to Peter, James, and John, just as all the youth camps that I attended as a teenager were mountaintop experiences in my own life. I remember those camps and how I would cry at the end of the week at having to say goodbye to the new friends that I had met. I didn't want to leave this awesome place where I had met God and sometimes experienced firsthand the love of God, sometimes for the first time. Our pastor called those mountaintop experiences. And I think that this church, too, is a mountaintop. It's a thin place, a place between the earth, where the cars and the rivers are, and the heavens, where the helicopters and the airplanes fly, and where some of us think that God resides. A mountaintop. Despite all the noise, this church is a mountaintop, a place to be transformed, a quiet place to meet God, to be changed, to be renewed. But rather than letting this special gift and his mountaintop experience soak in, Peter, one of the disciples, one of my favorites actually, pipes up and says, "Hey Jesus, let me build you a shrine to commemorate this holy location and this holy transfiguration as you've turned into this gleaming white person." Peter is often the first disciple to speak up. He always has a lot to say, and because of that, he often puts his foot in his mouth. And he has good intentions, but he often says something that's really embarrassing and terribly wrong. And I think that's why I see myself in Peter so much sometimes. Peter's just witnessed this breathtaking supernatural event, and Jesus is literally transforming in front of his eyes. And even that is not enough to stun Peter into silence. But An unexpected voice does stun Peter. The voice says, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. When God speaks, everyone else stops speaking, stops whatever they were doing, and falls down to worship. In the presence of true holiness, there are no words. Here in this story, God's words remind us of the first day of Jesus' ministry, which we talked about a few weeks ago. Jesus waded out into the Jordan River to be baptized by his cousin, John the Baptist. Today, though, God's voice adds an extra special message just for Peter, and maybe for the others too. He says, "Listen to him. Please stop talking. Stop coming up with great ideas and new ways to memorialize how wonderful Jesus is, and just be with Jesus. Delight in him, because his days are numbered, and you won't always have him in front of you to be with." So finally, the disciples do what I think I might have done at the first sign of Jesus transforming into a human light bulb. I think I would have fallen onto the ground and been afraid. I don't think God is trying to scare us, but I think when we fully understand, even just for one moment, how deep and how wide and how high and how powerful the love of God is for us, then we must be a bit afraid. We must be a bit overwhelmed. Love like that has never been known on this earth since Jesus died. We don't understand it. We don't have anything to compare it to. There's nothing present in our world to help us really grasp a concept of a love so great and so encompassing as the love of God. God anticipates our reaction, our fear, though, and doesn't want us to be immobilized. Jesus says more times than any other sentence in the New Testament, "Do not be afraid." It's a warning, it's an encouragement that he repeats over and over. Jesus is here to empower us to be an example of love and life. We are not to be afraid, even of things that we can't understand and can't comprehend. When we look up, when we look directly into the face of God or of Jesus, then all else fades away. There are no clouds, no sunshine, no other prophets or teachers, nothing to distract us from the wholeness of one perfect moment. But as quickly as this amazing story begins, so quickly it ends, and the four men are coming down from their mountaintop experience. They've seen and heard and felt the presence of God, and they've been changed. But one question still lingers in their hearts. What do we do now? And God answers, "Tell no one about this vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." Now, that puzzled me at first. If you remember our story from a few weeks ago about the Samaritan woman here at the well, she got up and immediately told everyone she came in contact with about Jesus, about living water, and she helped to convert a whole area called Samaria. So why are these disciples told not to share their experience, not to tell about who Jesus really is and this amazing miracle that they've seen? I was thinking about that this week, and then I read a blog from a friend and a United Methodist pastor. She lives in Florida, and she's an artist and a sculptor. Her name is Jan Richardson, and her blog is called The Painted Prayer Book, if you ever want to look it up. Jan writes that all people need time to mull over their life experiences before sharing them. Jan just lost her partner at the end of the year last year, and she just last week picked up her paintbrushes again. So this blog was really powerful. Jan said that space and distance and time allow us to more fully contemplate and to understand all that is happening to us and all that has happened to us. And I couldn't help but think about the flood and how all of us are dealing differently with our own recovery processes. She said God is trying to reach out and to teach us at each stage of our journey something new about ourselves and about the God self. If we stop talking, if we stop sharing so much all the time and just learn to be quiet for a few moments, we might be able to listen to God more, to get better answers to our questions. In one last Hollywood film, Eat, Pray, Love, Julia Roberts attempts to pray for the first time in the middle of the night. In near desperation, she cries out and then waits silently on the bathroom floor. She's asking God in the middle of the night what to do about her failing marriage. She's waiting in silence, and then she hears a very quiet voice, and it's her own voice, and it says, "Go back to bed." Maybe God speaks like that. Maybe it's not always a loud voice. Maybe it's a small, quiet voice inside of us. Maybe it's even our own voices, if we listen carefully. Maybe God is telling us to go back to bed. I was talking to Keith yesterday when we ran into each other in Longmont about the fact that some people say that they have a problem praying and meditating because they often fall asleep. And when I stayed in a monastery, a Benedictine nun told me once that sometimes the most holy thing you can do is just go to sleep. Because if you're too tired to pray, then you're too tired. So just sleep first and pray later. I thought that was pretty good advice. And I think maybe today God's telling me to go back to bed and to get some rest. I think God tells us to let some time pass so that we can better understand what we're going through. Simply be quiet and listen for a while. And spend some time with Jesus on a mountaintop, literally or figuratively. Today we are offered a mountaintop experience in this church, a quiet, special place where we can meet God face to face. Here at the communion table, leaving all of our thoughts and our words behind, fully delighted in the joy of the fresh, cool air on the mountain's peak. Looking back proudly at how far we've come, and looking forward expectantly to the journey ahead. Won't you join us? Steve, would you mind inviting the children to join us for communion?